I couldn't believe my ears. Isadora will inherit the company? I asked, my voice betraying none of the turmoil churning within me. My hands, however, clenched tightly beneath the tablecloth. The opulent crystal chandelier above the mahogany dining table cast a warm, inviting glow, yet a chilling frost seemed to have settled over the room. My father, Arthur Blackwood, the very man whose enterprise I had single-handedly rescued from impending financial ruin, barely lifted his gaze from his expertly seared filet mignon. "Let's be realistic, Penelope," he sighed, his tone condescending, as if addressing a particularly dim-witted child. "You excel in technical domains, but leadership? That's not your forte. We require someone with commanding presence, someone who inspires awe and respect. Your sister is the ideal candidate." Isadora, seated opposite me in a breathtaking custom-designed gown, delicately sipped her vintage Bordeaux, a subtle, knowing smirk playing on her lips. She hadn't lifted a finger to assist when Blackwood Industries teetered on the precipice of collapse. Yet now, with the company achieving record-shattering profits, she was being handed the reins of power without a second thought. "I developed the software that salvaged this company," I retorted, my voice sharp, cutting through the polite clinking of silverware. "Without my innovation, you wouldn't even possess a company to bequeath." My father chuckled, a dismissive sound that grated on my nerves. He then reached into his pocket, produced his wallet, and tossed a crumpled bill onto the table. "For your efforts," he stated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. $50, 50 measly dollars, for years spent toiling late into the night, writing code until my eyes burned with exhaustion. For countless sleepless nights, spent meticulously analyzing financial statements, designing a system that not only rescued the company from bankruptcy, but propelled it to the pinnacle of the industry. $50 for the groundbreaking innovation that transformed Blackwood Industries from a failing entity into a billion-dollar behemoth. My mother shifted uneasily in her chair, offering me a fleeting sympathetic glance, but remained silent. Everyone did. I looked at my father, the man I had revered throughout my childhood, the man I had dedicated my life to impressing. In that instant, a profound realization dawned on me. It was never about merit, never about hard work, success, or loyalty. It was solely about control. "I understand," I whispered, my voice far quieter than I intended. I picked up the $50 bill, turned it over in my fingers, then calmly folded it into my napkin. I rose from the table. "Penelope, don't be dramatic," my father scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. I offered a serene smile. "I'm not being dramatic, father. I'm merely excusing myself. Clearly my role in this family is merely that of a supporting character. I shall remove myself from the scene." Isadora let out a soft, barely contained chuckle. "Penelope," my mother began, but I was already departing the dining room, the click of my heels echoing on the polished marble floor. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream or demand justice. I simply left. The following morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual, as was my custom. The office had undergone a dramatic transformation in the past year. Just 12 months prior, the atmosphere had been stifling. Employees whispering about impending layoffs, department heads resigning en masse before the company could completely crumble. Now, it thrived. My software had revolutionized the logistics sector, automating processes that previously took weeks to complete in mere minutes. We had expanded globally, securing contracts with prestigious clients, but today, something felt profoundly different. As I walked through the lobby, I observed several anxious glances, exchanged between colleagues. Conversations abruptly ceased as I passed. Upon reaching my office, I discovered the door already ajar. My desk was completely empty. My computer was gone. The engraved nameplate that once proudly displayed Penelope Blackwood, CTO, was missing. Seated comfortably in my chair, casually reviewing documents, was Isadora. She looked up, flashing a bright, insincere smile. "Good morning, Penelope. Didn't father inform you? You'll be relocating to this office. You'll be reporting to me now." My stomach plummeted, but my composure remained unshaken. "What will be my position?" I inquired, my voice steady. Isadora tilted her head, feigning contemplation. She shrugged. "We'll devise something suitable. Perhaps something in IT support," I repeated, incredulous. "In my own company?" "In the company I saved," she smirked. "Father suggested you take some time off. Actually, relax. Perhaps pursue some personal projects. But don't fret. You'll remain a part of the company in some capacity." My heart hammered against my ribs. They wanted me out, after everything I had done, after every sacrifice, every late night, every ingenious solution I had devised to keep this company afloat. They were discarding me as an afterthought, as if I were worth only $50. I stared at my sister, then at the company logo emblazoned on the glass walls. Blackwood Industries, a name that once symbolized family, loyalty, and legacy, now represented nothing but betrayal. But I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I simply nodded, understood. Then I turned and walked away. Watch me. The first step was to disappear. Not literally. I continued to report for work the next morning, occupying the minuscule desk they had assigned me in the farthest corner of the building, surrounded by interns, who were yet unaware of my true identity. But I didn't retaliate. I didn't argue. I observed. Within a week, I had a clear understanding of the situation. Isadora was profoundly out of her depth. She had no comprehension of how to manage a company, let alone one that had recently transformed into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. She spent her days in endless, unproductive meetings, making decisions based on intuition rather than concrete data. She dismissed department heads who attempted to offer guidance, replacing them with her acquaintances, individuals whose sole qualification was their knowledge of wine pairings. The company wasn't merely vulnerable, it was on the verge of another collapse, and I had painstakingly built everything they were now systematically destroying. That's when I made my decision. If they didn't want me at Blackwood Industries, I would create something even greater. Late one evening, after most employees had departed, I found myself in a coffee shop, seated opposite three of the most brilliant, capable individuals I had ever encountered. James, our former CFO, a financial wizard, who had expertly navigated the company through its previous financial crisis. Ava, the most skilled data analyst in the industry, who had essentially created our customer profiling system from scratch. And Daniel, our lead engineer, the only person who understood my software as well as I did, because we had collaborated on most of its development during those caffeine-fueled, desperate late nights. All three had quietly resigned within the past month. They weren't fools. They had recognized the writing on the wall. Penelope. James leaned forward, his expression serious. What's the plan? I looked at them, then produced a folder. Inside were the plans for my next venture. We're building something new, I stated simply. I didn't need to persuade them. They were already on board. The software. Yes, it was under Blackwood Industries' name. Yes, they technically possessed the rights to it. However, I had written the original code long before its implementation within the company. And the latest version, the one incorporating the most advanced features, I had never uploaded it to their servers. It remained solely mine. I spent the next month working in secrecy, refining, enhancing, and fortifying my creation. Then I pitched it, not to Blackwood Industries, but to their competitors. Within 3 weeks, I had received 3 offers. By month's end, I had secured a contract worth hundreds of millions. And just like that, I wasn't merely competing with Blackwood Industries. I was poised to obliterate them. The first signs of trouble for my father's company arrived subtly. Clients who had been loyal to Blackwood Industries for over a decade suddenly terminated their contracts, one after another. Isadora panicked, demanding answers, firing employees indiscriminately, blaming everyone but herself. But the truth was straightforward. The industry had moved on. The next generation of software, the one I had perfected, now powered their competitors' systems. Blackwood Industries was instantly obsolete, and I was just getting started. 6 months later, I found myself at a luxurious hotel ballroom, sipping champagne, as the keynote speaker concluded their presentation. This was the Tech Innovators Gala, one of the year's most prestigious industry events. Every major CEO, investor, and executive was in attendance. And this year, I was the guest of honor. As my name was announced, I rose and walked onto the stage, my heels clicking against the polished floor. Tonight, we celebrate the visionaries who are propelling the industry forward, the host announced. Penelope Blackwood, the creator of the most revolutionary logistics software on the market, has transformed the operations of global corporations. Her company, Aurora Systems, is now valued at over $500 million. My father and Isadora, seated in the back. Their company was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, and they both knew it. I smiled, not out of malice or revenge, but because I had finally learned the lesson they had so vehemently attempted to teach me. I didn't require their validation. I had triumphed on my own terms. And this time, there was nothing they could do to stop me. Exactly 1 year had passed since that humiliating dinner. 1 year since my father had contemptuously tossed a crumpled $50 bill onto the table, declaring me inadequate. 1 year since my sister had smirked, knowing she was being handed something she had never earned. 1 year since I had walked away without a fight, only to win the war. Hundreds of millions. Market share steadily climbing. Blackwood Industries, they were hemorrhaging. I had systematically dismantled every advantage they once possessed. Their clients had abandoned them. Their stock had plummeted. Their latest financial report, leaked to the press just a week prior, confirmed the worst. They were on the verge of collapse. Then, at precisely 10 o'clock, my assistant, Clara, buzzed my office. "Penelope, your father and sister are here to see you." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The inevitable had arrived. "Send them in." They entered like ghosts. Isadora's designer attire, unable to conceal the exhaustion etched on her face. My father, always so composed, so self-assured, looked older, defeated. They had lost, and they knew it. "Penelope," my father began, his voice carefully measured. "We need to talk." I gestured towards the chairs in front of my desk. They hesitated, likely realizing that, for the first time in their lives, they were entering my territory. But they sat. Isadora shifted uncomfortably, her nails tapping against the armrest. She avoided my gaze. My father sighed. "Look, we've had our differences, but ultimately, we're family. Blackwood Industries is struggling. We need your help." There it was. I allowed the silence to stretch, watching them squirm. Finally, I spoke. "And precisely what are you asking me to do?" My father leaned forward. "We're prepared to offer you a leadership position, something meaningful. We realize now that we may have underestimated you." "You realize now?" I questioned, raising an eyebrow. Isadora finally looked up, her expression strained. "Penelope, don't be petty. We need you." "All right," I laughed. A genuine laugh. "You need me," I repeated. "That's amusing, because a year ago, you declared I lacked leadership qualities. You asserted I was only suitable for technical tasks." My father had the audacity to appear frustrated. "You're aware of how business operates. Decisions were made, but now we must move forward. If you return, we can rebuild Blackwood Industries together." Control. They didn't want me, they wanted to possess me. "And what position are you offering?" I asked, feigning curiosity. My father straightened, as if about to finalize a deal. "You would be second in command, directly under Isadora." I blinked, then I laughed again, louder this time. Isadora flushed crimson. "Penelope, grow up," she snapped. "You created some software. Fine, but that doesn't imply you possess the acumen to manage a company of our stature." I ceased laughing. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the desk. I ensured my voice was as cold as glacial ice. "Isadora," I said softly, "my company is worth hundreds of millions. Yours is weeks from bankruptcy. Explain to me again, which one of us lacks the competence to manage a company?" Silence. Pure, blissful silence. My father cleared his throat. "Penelope, please." It was that word that shattered any lingering vestige of my former self. Please. The same man who had dismissed me, belittled me, and thrown money in my face as if I were a mere employee, not his daughter, was now begging, and I had never felt more serene. "No," I stated, my voice firm. Isadora stiffened. "Excuse me," I said. "No," I repeated. "I don't require Blackwood Industries. You needed me, and you discarded me. You made your choice, and now, you must live with the consequences." My father exhaled sharply, frustration creeping into his voice. "Are you seriously going to allow your own family to fail?" "I haven't caused anything to transpire," I replied smoothly. "You destroyed this company the moment you placed Isadora in charge." Isadora pushed back from her chair, rising abruptly. Her face was flushed. "You're simply bitter," she retorted. "You've always been envious of me." I offered her a slow, amused smile. "Envious? Isadora, I don't need to be envious. I already possess everything you ever desired." I stood, smoothing my blouse. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a genuine company to manage." My father departed in furious silence. Isadora stormed out, but before she disappeared through the doorway, she turned. "I hope you're content, Penelope." I met her gaze, utterly calm. "I am." She exited without another word. As the doors closed behind her, I sat back down, exhaled, and smiled. For the first time in my life, I was finally free. The moment the doors closed behind my father and sister, I allowed myself a long, slow exhale. They had believed they could walk in here, offer a few hollow apologies, and expect me to rush back to rectify their mistakes. They had no idea who I had become. But as much as I relished watching them squirm, I knew this wasn't over. Blackwood Industries was dying, and when a sinking ship goes down, it drags everything and everyone down with it. The question was, would I allow that to happen? Business magazines, online forums, even national headlines. Former industry titan, Blackwood Industries collapses overnight. Poor leadership decisions sink a multi-billion-dollar company. How greed and family politics destroyed Blackwood Industries. The sole reason Blackwood Industries had survived its initial near collapse was because of the software I had built. And once I was gone, it was merely a matter of time. The headquarters building, the remaining assets, even the Blackwood name itself. My father was desperate. He had over-leveraged the company, taking out loans in a frantic attempt to save it. Now the banks were seizing everything, and I could buy it. The poetic justice was almost too perfect. That evening, in my penthouse apartment overlooking the city, I contemplated my desires. I had spent so much time proving myself, so much energy battling against the individuals who had dismissed, betrayed, and belittled me. And now, I had already won. Did I truly need to crush them further? I recalled that night, 1 year ago, when my father had tossed $50 onto the table as if it were a waitress tip, as if I were worthless. And just like that, my decision became crystal clear. I made my move the next morning. I didn't employ an investment firm. I didn't use a third party. I wanted them to know precisely who was taking everything from them. So I contacted the bankruptcy attorney, handling Blackwood's liquidation myself. I'd like to submit a direct bid on all Blackwood Industries assets, I stated, including the name. The attorney hesitated. Ms. Blackwood, do you understand the implications? I smiled. I understand perfectly. A week later, I was seated in the same boardroom my father had once dominated like a king. Only this time, I held the crown. The documents were spread before me, a sleek black and gold pen resting atop the final contract. With a single signature, Blackwood Industries would become mine. The empire my father had built, the one he had refused to allow me to lead, would be mine. My father and Isadora sat opposite me, both ashen-faced. My father looked like he had aged 10 years in the past week. Isadora wouldn't even meet my gaze. I still can't believe you're doing this, she muttered. I raised an eyebrow. Doing what? Purchasing a failing company? Acquiring a name that no longer holds any value? She scowled. You know what I mean? I leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers against the polished wood of the table. Funny, I mused. A year ago, you didn't believe I was capable of running a company, but now you act as if I possess excessive power. My father exhaled sharply. Penelope, just sign the damned papers. I picked up the pen, paused, then slid the documents back across the table. My father blinked. Isadora frowned. What is this? My father asked. A counteroffer, I replied simply. He picked up the papers and scanned the first page. His eyes widened. You're dissolving Blackwood Industries? Isadora gasped. You're shutting it down? I smiled. That's correct. My father looked as if he might explode. Why would you do that? I leaned forward, my voice calm. Because I don't need Blackwood Industries. I never did. But I do desire one thing. I pointed to a single clause on the last page. My father followed my finger. His breath hitched. Isadora snatched the document and read it aloud, her voice trembling. All remaining rights to the Blackwood name, patents, and intellectual property will be absorbed by Aurora Systems and permanently retired. She looked up at me, furious. You're not just buying it, you're erasing it. I met her gaze, unwavering. Yes, Blackwood Industries will cease to exist. The name will never be rebuilt. The company will never be resurrected. It will simply vanish, just as you attempted to make me disappear. My father clenched his jaw. You're merely doing this to retaliate. No, I corrected. I'm doing this because some things deserve to die. I picked up the pen again. This time, I signed, and just like that, it was over. The Blackwood era was gone. In its place, Aurora Systems soared. With no competition from my father's defunct empire, we expanded rapidly, securing exclusive contracts that once belonged to Blackwood Industries. Their legacy had been erased. Mine had only just begun. 3 months later, I received a letter. No return address, just a simple handwritten note inside. Penelope, I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope one day you'll understand. Father. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I tossed it into the fireplace. And as the flames consumed the last vestige of Blackwood Industries, I smiled, because I had finally, completely, and utterly won hundreds of millions. Market dominance. Significant and growing. Status, undisputed industry leader. But numbers weren't what satisfied me most. What satisfied me was walking through my office every morning and seeing a company built on merit. A company where employees were valued for their skills, not their connections. A company that I had built without needing my family's approval. The Blackwood Family Annual Gala. I had forgotten all about it. Every year, for as long as I could remember, my parents had hosted the most exclusive event in the industry. Back when they still held power. This year, My father wasn't hosting it. Someone else had taken over. Someone who had purchased their mansion at auction after the bankruptcy. The invitation was merely a formality. Whoever was running it now undoubtedly had no knowledge of the history between me and the Blackwoods. It was an accident that I even received one. But instead of discarding it, I made a decision. I was going, not to prove anything, not for revenge, but to bring this chapter to a definitive close. Glittering chandeliers, elegant music, and a sea of wealthy elites sipping champagne as if they still controlled the world. Except this time, I was the most powerful person in the room, and they all knew it. Whispers followed me as I entered. Is that Penelope Blackwood? No, she runs Aurora Systems now. Didn't she destroy her father's company? I ignored them. I wasn't there for them. I was there for one reason: regret. Isadora, on the other hand, still maintained an air of superiority, but I could detect the cracks in her facade, the way her fingers clenched around her champagne flute, the way her eyes darted towards me, then away. For the first time in our lives, I held the power, and they both knew it. I walked towards them, my heels clicking on the polished floor. Isadora stiffened. My father turned, and for a split second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not anger, not resentment, but defeat. Penelope, he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I tilted my head slightly. Father? A long silence stretched between us, then he sighed. I suppose this is where you glow. I smiled slightly. No, father, this is where I say goodbye. Isadora blinked. What? I didn't come here to rub this in your faces, I continued. I didn't come to remind you of everything you lost, because frankly, that's no longer my concern. I set my drink down on a passing tray and met my father's eyes one last time. For years, I dedicated my life to earning your approval, trying to prove I was adequate. I exhaled slowly. But I no longer need that. I turned to Isadora, and I don't hate you. I never did. I simply pity you. Her face tightened. Because unlike you, I didn't need to seize power, I stated. I built my own. Her lips parted slightly, but no words emerged. For the first time, she had nothing to say. I gave them both one last look. Then I walked away, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because, for the first time in my life, I was free. I left the gala without looking back, without the need to prove anything, because this was never about revenge. It was about becoming the person I was meant to be. And as I stepped into my car, heading back to a company, a legacy, a future that was entirely my own, I smiled, because this wasn't the end of my story. It was merely the beginning.